Hello, my friend, and welcome to this episode of A Call to Leadership. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, your host, and I'm so glad you are here. Well, if you're like me and you've had exposure to television shows and animated series and all kinds of entertainment, sometimes you wonder, just how does it happen? What is going on behind closed doors? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that when my friend, producer PJ Accetturo starts to tell me some of these insights, I got a pretty good feeling you're going to learn a thing too. Can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is A Call to Leadership. PJ, welcome back.
Nate, great to be back, man. I talk to you probably every other day.
Probably. It's a good thing. It's a good thing on speed dial.
That's right.
And so probably very few people know your challenges and your plights as much as someone who is a mentor and a coach and a friend. And we talk about it sometimes on the program. We talk about it in life, but rarely do we peer into the challenges we face as entrepreneurs in the moment, like when we are truly at the depths. In fact, sometimes I'll ask someone to be on the show who's really going through some massive change and some massive struggle. And they'll say, well, Nate, let's regroup for when I'm on the other side. It's like, no. Like in this moment, it's so critical to extract like what is going on, because, and I'll just preface it with this. When I started in entrepreneurship so many years ago, man, I was hustling bootleg cassettes at a flea market when I was 17 years old. So that's like, oh yeah, this is the entrepreneurial journey. It's so easy. It's so cool, right? Just show up, pull out your tapes of, NWA and whatever else I was playing at the time, and I'm off to the races. That's not true entrepreneurship. That's a kid with a side hustle. But once you get into the real grit of not only running a business, but maintaining your sanity in a life full of unknowns and challenges every single moment, the big question is, how do you do it? What are some of the challenges you face on a daily basis that sometimes not only keep you up at night, but keep you from thinking even clearly during the day? I mean, this is real.
Right.
Let's just unpack this stage, this moment in your journey.
Yeah. So thriving in the midst of crisis is, in many ways, I think, my life calling. The life calling of a lot of entrepreneurs, the life calling of those who identify with ADHD. It certainly is this weird, like, razor's edge of like it's almost like it's like in a wave where it's like too much, too little, both bad. But there's this line, this line you can ride that's kind of on the perfect brink of like chaos and mundanity, sort of boring and too much. And I think as entrepreneurs, that's the sweet spot, is finding that lane. So yeah, excited to talk more about it. Should I maybe give a brief overview of who I am and what I do and all that?
I got it in the pre-talk. Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll know who you are. They already know who you are. And so in your journey, obviously, you're in a sector that has massive change. You're not in the tax business, right? The code is, there's change, but it's pretty stable. Not in your world. Maybe unfold a little the nuances of how often change happens in your world that causes you to have to ride that center line.
Yeah. So, really everything in film production revolves around who's paying for what. How do you get to the green light? And then once you get a green light, how do you stay on track for budget? How do you stay with your financiers? How do you, essentially get to the finish line of your first, in our case, a season of a TV show? So I think we've talked about in previous episodes, getting the green light is the hardest part of anyone in Hollywood, is journey. And honestly, to even just get funding for, your movie or part of your series or your full series is the 0.1%. You're already in the NFL. Like, it's unbelievably hard. So we're so blessed that is behind us. We have a TV show, Ghost the Ruin. It's an animated series coming out next year. And we're pumped. We're talking to different networks right now about, what platform will it be licensed on. But production, there's a reason they call it production hell. You're always in crisis. It's always crazy. And I've been watching this TV series called The Movies That Made Us. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay, so this is on Netflix. This is going to be time of your life if you like Jurassic Park, E.T., Elf, Back to the Future. So what it does is it goes back and it showcases all these crazy stories of how some of the most iconic movies of all time should not have been made. And I think prior to watching the series, I was just kind of like, well, Star Wars, I'm sure it was easy. Lord of the Rings, I'm sure it was easy. And then the more I read these stories, the more I'm like, how did they not go crazy? None of these films should have been made. Every film is a miracle. That's what I've learned.
This is important because on the outside looking in, you would never know that. You would never know how so many of these movies, so many of these business endeavors, because it's a business, we're on the brink of disaster. And because what's the typical thought process? A big production company, a Paramount or a Universal or name any of these companies, a Disney, just puts money out and the movie just gets made, right? So you're saying that's not the natural course of events. In other words, maybe it oversimplifies it.
Yeah, I mean, for the studio side of things, maybe a lot of times it's really simple. But I was just watching how Elf got made, one of my all-time favorite Christmas films. And it was a first-time writer from, East Coast, moved to Hollywood. He's working at a lingerie factory by day, writing the script by night, and just happened to, give the script to another producer. He thinks producers like, hey, this is great. We're gonna make it big. He thinks the producer's like a big shot. Turns out that producer just moved to Hollywood 6 months prior to him. And then he'd pick up another producer. And, he also was like a junior producer at, this big company. And so he was like, yeah. And they was like, he's got it. And then they find out, well, he's too. So it's just like one leads to another. And so finally they get Jon Favreau, who now we know from doing Mandalorian, Iron Man, one of the greatest directors in the modern age. But Jon Favreau was an actor. He was in Rudy. He was in Friends.
Was he in Swingers?
He was in Swingers.
Yeah,
exactly. And so he had made a low budget feature film before, but it flopped. But he was kind of the only one who could do it. So they're like, all right, the script's got potential. Jon Favreau's got potential. And it was just lucky coincidence after lucky coincidence, right time, right place, right person, to where it was just enough to get to the next level, And even Will Ferrell, here's what's crazy. By casting Will Ferrell as the lead, Will hadn't made a breakout hit. He was just an SNL sort of regular. And so people really weren't trying to fund the production because Will was, he's just not bankable. Why not get Chris Farley? At the time, everyone was pushing for Chris Farley. And then I think Will's first movie hit and everyone was like, okay, I think it was not Old School, but I don't know, one of his like early comedies, and everyone's like, great, now he's bankable, let's greenlight the production. And that's the same story with The Office, where The Office was some niche British show, and they cast Steve Carell, and they're like, I don't know if this is bankable. And then 40-Year-Old Virgin came out, and boom, off to the races. So there's countless stories. Oh my God, countless stories just like that.
So interesting. Yeah, you think about, don't they know they've got Ricky Bobby? It's like, hello.
Not yet.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't know. And it's the I guess in some ways it's social proof of a particular actor's presence and ability to create a profit, right? I mean, draw people in, because it's back to the business side of it.
Yep.
I mean, yes, they're designed to entertain. However, what does the entertainment do? it creates profit for the shareholders.
Right. Yeah. I think I want to like de-romanticize people. I know everyone's like movies are art and all this stuff. And like, yes, to directors, to writers, to everyone sort of below the line and a few positions above the line, like the creative projects under director. But to a studio, it really is like a brick and mortar business, or, it's a business like any other business. And, they're all publicly traded companies. So it's not callous to say, look, they're in the business of, in a sense, not even making money. It's actually just not losing money. So that's the whole MO with projects they put out, is how do we de-risk this as much as possible? And so for me as a producer, that's my job, is to basically, when I'm packaging shows, create an undeniable package. Not that it'll make like, Arcane or some of these big shows. It's just that it won't lose money because we've done all the guesswork. We've taken them out. We've got the big star. We've got the big Marvel talent for the writing. We've got the big, Oscar nom for the director. At least it won't lose money.
I'm glad you bring that up, because so then the strategy is, if we can make sure our bottom line doesn't lose money with 80-90% of our productions, then that other 10 to 20%, which are profitable, will then continue to drive shareholder value.
Right. And create really super brands. So the big thing that's hot right now is we starting with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 2003-ish. That was kind of the dawn to some degree of the new superhero age. And then it was like died down, and then Iron Man like brought it back. And really since 2008, we've been on this big superhero kick. But it seems like now what we're pivoting to, there's a lot of superhero fatigue. And what we're pivoting to is transmedia, which is basically video games becoming the center stage for a lot of movies. Super Mario, there's only a few movies this year that were billion-dollar IP, but Super Mario Brothers was one of them. There's a huge series called The Last of Us on HBO, which is phenomenal, also based on a game. And there's a lot more video games that are finally good. Like the quality of video game movies is finally amazing.
So the whole idea is fascinating, because you're peering behind the curtain of an industry that the general public doesn't see, right? They see the actors, they see the storyline. And of course the actors they see are larger than life in their eyes, and they're celebrities, they're stars. We call them stars, right?
It's a sexy industry.
It is.
In fact, that's the only reason anyone's in this industry, because I'll tell you firsthand, I would so much rather be selling widgets, owning a tax firm, owning a winery. You know what I mean? Like those are all businesses that are consistent revenue drivers, have a high quality of life for those who own it. Showbiz, if I say so, showbiz sucks. I mean, from like a lifestyle perspective of like directors that we work with working 20-hour days for 9 months plus on end, producers, just having the most stressful, over budget, overtime, 6 months, 2 years between projects that you've got a budget for in your projects. Like it's fun, but it's also like debilitating.
and that's a pivot I want to make with you very soon. Before we do though, let's dispel some other things about this industry. You talk about, of course, you see executive director, you see producer, you see the actors' names on the screen, and it is larger than life. It is quite an accolade. On the other side of it, how are actors viewed in this industry? Are they considered just people, employees, people who get the job done? I mean, how are they? Do they still have that same sort of aura, larger than life status, even within the industry? Or is it just like, oh, let's get this person, let's get that person. That person doesn't work out, just call them up and see if they'll fit?
So this is the weird duality. Like at some level, all talent is a commodity that you're trading, almost in the way of like, I don't know, like a golfer, and I'm selecting like what brand of drivers should I use? I'm a race car driver and I'm choosing what type of car. At some level, talent becomes like playing cards, almost like baseball players. But I think because of the nature of how emotional this industry is, there is so much intangibles as to how you're selecting talent, what drives the needle for like attaching, let's just say a certain star that actually moves the needle with the studios for the studio to greenlight the project. But then on the flip side, what they think that will drive the needle with audience participation. Because now, for instance, we cast an actress, her name's Natalie Emmanuel. She's got 6 million followers. She was in Game of Thrones, Fast and Furious, and she's got 6 million followers. That moves the needle for our show because we build into the contract, like you have to do these many posts about our show. So it's kind of a mix of like, you want the right talent for the job, but at the same time, you're as a producer, you're trying to de-risk the process as much as possible. Like we had another cast. It was we have 2 actresses audition, both incredible. Can't say which one's better per se, but one's a huge singer. If you know our show, you know what I'm talking about. But she's a really popular pop star, if you will. And it's like, okay, if two talents are somewhat comparable on the talent front, then it makes the most strategic sense as a producer to try and partner with the person who has more reach, because that's the name of the game. Everyone wants this to have as much popularity as possible, right?
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. I'm always interested about this psychology of the film industry and how we elevate the actors to this status, if you will. I mean, we roll, after they finish their job, their vocation, their work, we roll out a huge red carpet and we give them accolades. I couldn't imagine after tax season when I'm just getting my accountants in a row of a red carpet and sharing this, how well they did and how they were stars in this area. People don't care. Like they could care less about that, but they are so interested in these awards and these ceremonies because something struck them personally.
Right.
They were impacted in such a way that perhaps had them reframe their entire conception of a certain idea, or so many different pieces emerge and evolve from this one industry of storytelling, essentially.
Yeah. It's crazy to me how, essentially like for thousands of years, right, humanity has sort of passed on not just traditions and our mythos of like where we came from through storytelling, but in a sense, it's where we get our values from. Like how we actually see ourselves as creatures comes from essentially the stories we pass on from one generation to another. And that's why Hollywood's a $40+ billion industry. It's because this is actually where we develop like our formation for our kids, because we let them watch Star Wars. That's the spirit of how, in a sense, the important storytelling is, because it's our core essence as what separates us from the animals, in a sense, right?
So good. So this is where we pivot to talk about the storytelling and the story of, does this industry wreck you? Does it, what is
talk
the
to my wife, talk to my credit card companies.
What happens behind closed doors as your values and your motive is pure to tell a story that is inspiring and that does justice to your not only your creative ability but your ability to create something that has not yet been created. What are some of the wounds that happen along the way?
It's a great question. I mean, fortunately, it's not like it's politics in the sense that I feel like for someone to get into Hollywood, they have to like sell their soul to be successful. It's not true. But I will say that depending on what position you have on set, and what niche you get on the industry, it really can drain the life of you. So it's like, okay, I'll give you a tale of 2 students. So growing up, I had a buddy in high school, and we were like neck and neck, making as many movies as we could in high school. And he was like, you know what, I'm going to go to film school. I'm going to get a big loan and I'm just going to go all in on film school. And I was like talking to my parents and they're like, I don't know, it's like 50 grand a semester to go to film school. It's really expensive. And then everyone graduates and they, become a production assistant and make like $50 a day, with like 200 grand in debt. It's like, so, that's the route he wanted to go. And he's like, you know what? So he went to film school 4 years and then he moved and he graduated and went to LA. And then he just was like, I'm going to work my way up the production ladder. And so he started working as a lighting assistant and then worked his way up for 10 years. And by the time those 10 years were over, he hadn't made a single personal project like short film. Now, granted, he worked on like Westworld and all these huge films. And he ended up making a good like day rate or whatever like that, like a couple $100 a day. But he was burned out because they're 16-hour days. And so he kind of lost his personal drive and passion to make movies. Whereas in my case and in other cases, I think if you can not work for the machine and you instead have the machine come to you. So like in my case, I made a lot of commercials and documentaries, which kind of paid for me to have free time to do short films and work my way into the narrative space for movies and TV shows. And then I did YouTube and I grew to 1 million subscribers. And once then I had that as leverage, I was able to then have essentially the expertise to where when I met our financiers, it was like the calling card of like, yeah, this is my background. I know YouTube. I know video games. That's what my story is about. Here's the people I want to hire that we bring this project to life. And it's like, okay, good. And I still maintain my sort of like boy-like wonder, if you will, because I feel like I stayed in control of the creative seat the whole time. But that's not the case for everybody. And that's how the industry can really destroy people because, again, you're a cog in the wheel and it doesn't scratch the itch of significance unless you make it your own. Take control of your destiny, so to say, right?
That's so important. And as you're sharing that about your journey, I wonder, someone listening is wondering as well, what part of the equation that my past has relevance to my current setting or my future? In other words, how did you formulate the effectiveness of the YouTube and the gaming in relationship to your desire to create something? In other words, did you think, well, I could go there, I've got a number of different verticals. I choose this vertical because of
right.
What?
Yep, that's a great question. And I would say that's the essence of success in the film industry and really most industries at large is stage one is the discovery process of like, what do I like to do? In a sense, as a part of that is building the skills necessary to succeed in your industry, maybe as a part of like the work that kind of comes next. So like your first years in Hollywood or in the entertainment industry, really any industry, is trying a bunch of things, seeing what resonates with you most, and then developing the skills it takes to actually become a participant and a player in that space. And as like an artist, I would say finding your voice is the most important thing. Everyone hears that, but it's like, how the hell do you do that? It's actually takes a long time of you mimicking the voices of others to find what are the commonalities. It's like, I'm going to do this project that mimics this and this project that mimics that. And then over the course of like 10 projects, let's say, you notice themes that resonate and stay between all that sort of copying and imitating and stealing, so to say. And I think over time, you're able to extract the essence of what makes you, you. And that is where your success lies. Like there's this great analogy. It's like, okay, a bear is not that interesting, not that exciting. Someone who can ride a unicycle, not that interesting and not that exciting. But a bear who can ride a unicycle, well, that's something you can build a circus around, right? And so I think that's the important thing in the industry is like, you never have to be the top 1% in any given endeavor. Like it's just, freaks of nature who's are that once in a generation talent. But if you can be in the top 10% of 2 or 3 complementary skill sets that when put together makes something really unique, has a unique perspective that the market doesn't have, well, then people will pay to show what the market doesn't have, right?
That's so insightful, because someone listening is wondering, how do I manifest that? And breaking that down is so critical, because, and I think in some ways it's also liberating, that you don't have to focus on necessarily conforming to a norm that is outside of your purpose and your skills, but to really embrace
Yes.
the variations that create the unique value proposition that is you, because all of us provide access as guides to places where people could not go without us, if we simply just embrace the uniqueness of our own experiences, and then share those experiences in a way that's meaningful to others, so that they can reach what their desires are. And so, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about, of course, naturally, I'm thinking about my own journey as you're sharing your journey. And I'm thinking, just having a conversation with some clients today about being in the mortgage business for 10 years and the structuring of tax returns, so that we have the most advantageous way to make sure we have funding while staying in the law, and underwriting, and also leadership. And you marry all these pieces together, and you have a collage of skills that lend themselves so well to solving a problem that's in the current space.
Yep.
And so I think the operative piece is to, one, don't bury who you are. Don't bury where you've been. Don't bury the challenges and the setbacks and the foibles that have refined you into the place and the person you are today, who is able to meet a challenge head on that is faced in your either industry or your ability. And perhaps you may be on the cusp of it. Maybe it hasn't manifested itself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so incumbent and critical of us to have the foresight and peer around the corner and say, perhaps I am not in my full space of ability right now, but I'm going to keep my eyes open, and I'm going to keep pressing to that fine center line as I move forward to continue to be in preparation.
Right.
I think sometimes that's the hope.
Yeah.
That will hold us together in these crazy moments of life.
It's true, because it's about finding your voice, finding about your purpose, finding your calling. And I think the more we can step into how uniquely weird we all are. Like, one of my favorite characters in the show Marvel is Owen Wilson's character, because he loves jet skis, right? It's the weirdest thing about him. But he's always talking about how great jet skis are. And that is weird, especially in his job. It's like not quite relevant, but it's so uniquely resonating that you're like, that's really infectious, that joy that he has about that. And so I think, as like storytellers, and by story, like, we're all storytellers in whatever we're doing. I think the more we can be passionate and excited about those things that make sort of like scratches the itch, like for me, it's like talking about video games and nerd culture and movies. And in my industry, it's not weird to talk about those, but I think the more we can incorporate how big of like weirdos that we all are in specific ways, the more it humanizes us, and the more people want to work with us, because there's just something different. They're not normal. They're not run of the mill. There's a spark there that, like you said, we can take someone where no one else has been, because it's unique to us, right?
Yeah, I love that. And it's liberating, because, well, I can be uniquely me, and it's okay to be different. Yeah, today more than ever, I believe. When I was younger, and you were talking about the late 70s and the early 80s, there was a huge push for conformity, like that you had to fit in a certain category, even in high school. And you probably had similar experiences in high school, where they're just different groups, right? So when I was growing up, there were the burnouts. There were the ones who smoked at school. We actually had a space, PJ, where people could smoke inside of a school. Go figure, right? Inside of a school. Of course, we also had, when I was growing up, we also had ashtrays on airplanes. That is crazy in and of itself. So we had the burnouts, we had the jocks, we had the preppies, and so we had these different groups, and then we had I had some buddies who none of us really fit in any of those groups. So I had an Indian buddy, African American buddy, of course, me being Palestinian, and an Asian, East Asian buddy, Chinese. So we called ourselves the Other Brothers. And so we had our own group of minorities that were, we were represented
I love it.
at this high school. And it was this desire and drive, of course, to fit in some way. I think as much as we desire to still have community and still have shared values and purpose, I think today more than ever, it's okay to say, you know what, there's nuances about me that make me uniquely me. And like today, back in the day, if you wore something that was weird to everybody else, then you were like, oh my goodness, why are you wearing, that Adidas jacket with those blue jeans, right? You need to wear a whole sweatpant outfit. And today nobody cares, right? It's your style. Now, granted, there are some caveats to that, but I say all that to say,
as in keep your pants, like wear pants in public.
Wear pants in public, right? At least still wear pants in public. But it's to me, it is that differentiation strategy. It is that ability to say that I'm okay. And that's another thing is I'm okay in my own skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need someone else's approval to confirm or justify that. I can enjoy jet skis like Owen Wilson does, and that just might be me. It just might be uniquely me, and that uniqueness just might be the difference that gets you through a door that someone else may not be able to get through, because that's just not what they were looking for. They were looking for something that was different.
Yeah.
And you've exhibited that. You've demonstrated that time and time again. That's what's gotten you into many doors.
So it has, and that, like, kind of the power of vulnerability is, and the power of being weird, if you will, is like what has made the difference in our show. Probably what actually got us financing is throughout our entire process, I've told everybody, like, I'm an outsider to Hollywood. Like, I am, and essentially to Hollywood, like, I'm a YouTuber, I'm a content creator. Video games are my main thing. I've never made a movie before. I've never made a TV show before, but no one knows, like, battle royales and all the sort of niche things that our story's about. And my writing partner on the show, like, worked at a mental health hospital. And so our show is this deep dive into the future of video games, because it's what's the mental health ramifications when video games feel indistinguishable from real life. Like, because he's coming back home when we were writing the story with like a black eye from his patients because they couldn't tell reality from non-reality. And meanwhile I'm writing like the battle royale, and how like the whole world kind of watches these teenagers go into the game, but they're not waking up once they're getting killed in the game. And it's like, what, and so to us, the weirdness of this story, the specificity of knowing what pro esports is like and being a content creator is all like, gives our story kind of this unique flair that like no one else could have done. And then on the production side, we're now telling the story of the community. Hey guys, follow this story. We're going to do weekly YouTube episodes because I'm going on a journey. I'm a Luke Skywalker. I found my Obi-Wan Kenobi. We've got amazing producers on our project that are going to teach us the journey, but I want to take you guys on that journey as well. So as I, the farm boy, am going to learn this for a new, all these new skills, all these new things about Hollywood, you guys are going to go too. And it's so much better than, someone who has, like, they call it curse of knowledge, like just our, if you will, like our showrunner trying to say everything without having what we call the audience point of view character, or the surrogate character. That's why most great stories like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, they all start with this kind of farm boy or farm girl start, because it's what the audience most identifies with. It's the idiot that they can take on the journey, and you see the growth over. That's why you gotta lean into especially when you're young and inexperienced, like lean into that. Hey, I am inexperienced, but I've got these passions, and here's why I think I'm a really good fit for this project, or for you as a client, or for XYZ. Right?
So good. And I wonder then, how does that lead into or figure into your own journey? And when I say that, I mean from the perspective of, there are times as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a person paving new pathways, where you sometimes question, like, is this worth it? And I'm curious as to how the understanding of how great stories unfold informs your story.
Yeah. I mean, in my case, to create a great story has taken a great story. The ups and downs of this project, starting it off, like getting fired from a really big job, total uncertainty, pandemic hits, our YouTube channel, in many ways kind of falling apart for whatever reason, like down in the depths. And with each huge crisis, like moment of crisis, it's been like, oh, new opportunity, new door has emerged. Right now we're sort of talking to different studios. It's not quite clear where financing is going to come from for, certain aspects of our project. It's probably bigger struggles, bigger stakes than it's ever been. And I think in previous years of my life, I really coped hard with escape mechanisms, if you will, from excessive like video games to excessive naps to like self-destructive tendencies, to lashing out at my wife, to not taking any time for self-care in my life. And it drove my marriage to the point of divorce. It drove myself not to suicide, but certainly to self-harming thoughts. And it's been incredible to see over the course of this year how doing therapy, doing inner work, doing workshops, doing work with my wife, has given me so much of a stronger foundation to have 10 times the stress I had last year, and to just say, okay, we'll figure out a way. And I cannot believe how calm I am now than for, again, like, a year ago, 2 years ago, when things were far easier and I was 10 times more of a mess and honestly like about to explode. And it's the result of essentially doing the inner work, and we can unpack that. But I'm telling you, it's incredible. Like, it's worth it to do the work.
Well, it's that finding that peace in the storm,
right?
That is so relevant. We talk about this from a spiritual side, right? Jesus sleeping in that boat. I mean, he had peace no matter how much that storm was raging. I think that comes from a confidence, that an assurance that no matter the circumstances, that I don't want to use the terminology that it's going to be okay, because sometimes it's not okay. However,
otherwise, I mean, like, people with cancer die, bankruptcies happen. Like, you cannot always find some perfect way out of a situation. I think the hope that we have, though, is that you look back at all the times in your life that things did seem hopeless, and yet we found a way through it. And yet, in many ways, that actually made us the person we are today. It made us stronger. And one of the things I say to myself often is, would I have killed for this problem that I have 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, even though it feels like it's going to kill me now? And I would have. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship and growth, is that each step of the way, it does feel like we cannot crest this mountain. And yet, if we just look back and remember all the insane points that led us to this, we'd realize how high, how far on the mountain we've actually come, right?
That's beautiful. I think about the galvanizing and the preparation of each milestone we face, every challenge that we're able to overcome. And I think about the business of growth, in that growth only happens when there is some kind of tension. You don't see it. Like, think about when you go to the gym or you exercise. I've been trying to get in shape for our event that we've got in January.
That's right. And the beach bod, the Florida beach bod.
Right. I found that I think in some ways, and just looking at even from a spiritual perspective, like if you think, well, there's just going to be an easy path for me because God's going to just make it easy. And that's just not the way things are. In fact, you think about like a guy like Paul, who had an insane mission to take this message to the world, right? And you think, well, okay, then God will just make the pathway straight. But look what happens to Paul. He's beaten, he's imprisoned, he's shipwrecked, he's left for dead, he's stoned. I mean, just about everything that could have went wrong with this guy did.
Yeah.
And I think about it like this, like, okay, those are our circumstances. And I believe that God is intimately acquainted and cares deeply about our circumstances. However, I believe that God is in the character building business. And he's going to take us through our circumstances to build us into the character of Christ. And so to me, as tough as it is, as much of a burden as it is that I face challenges, I don't face them alone. And I think that's where you come into the equation of, how do I overcome these obstacles in unison with others? We are not meant to be isolated. Yeah. We are not meant to, we can easily be picked off, but no, I must bind with others so that we can overcome together. And this character can be built in such a way that every obstacle I face, I can view it as an opportunity to overcome and be better.
Yep.
And so for you, I've had so much time that I've gotten to spend with you for the last few years now. And just watching you grow and being a part of that journey, man, it's such a blessing to see you grow and also discover the pathway to true joy and purpose and meaning in life, and not just to discover it, but also to share it with others. It's an honor.
Thank you, Nate. I mean, you've been such an indelible resource in my life. I mean, 3 years ago, I was driving for Uber and shooting real estate videos. Like, that's kind of where we met. And so through your coaching and some just support of people in your network and friendships, like, it's been a night and day difference. And also, like I said, the inner life, like my marriage has never been better. I've never felt more like I like myself finally. And it's the result of support and incredible friendships like yours. So thank you.
Well, and that's encouraging. And I want to have you back so we can talk more about some of those relationships and the ways that you've cultivated those, and perhaps some of the roadblocks along the way, because I know it's not always easy to be transparent, to be vulnerable, to be real, to actually like yourself.
Yeah.
Find a way.
I'd love to talk more about that. That's something that really is important to understand. The stories we told ourselves as kids, the things, the coping mechanisms, the defense that kept us safe as a child, but maybe keeps us in bondage as an adult. So looking forward to unpacking that.
Can't wait. Cliffhanger. Thanks, PJ. Always good to have you.
Thanks, man. Take care.